Chapter 52. Shuyi originally landed at Jiangqing International Airport this afternoon, so she made all the arrangements, packed her luggage and went to have dinner with Shi Yan to ease his lovesickness. Unexpectedly, due to the weather in the United States, it was delayed for several hours, and the landing time was expected to be postponed until the evening. What Shuyi didn't know was that Shi Yan had a very important dinner party tonight, so he couldn't have dinner with her originally. The location was a coincidence. It was only 500 or 600 meters away from Shuyi's house, and the restaurant's sign could still be seen from the window of Shuyi's house. In the evening, before Shi Yan left the office, he ordered Fan Lei to pick up Shuyi at the airport, while he went to the restaurant he had arranged. The elevator descended to the underground parking lot, and when he opened the door, he saw Qin standing in the elevator room. She hung her head halfway, looking a little absent-minded. Sensing the sound, Qin raised his head slowly, and when he saw clearly that the person coming was Shi Yan, he opened his eyes wide and subconsciously took a step back. But Shi Yan's eyes never stayed on her, and he walked straight to the parking space. After Qin consciousness came back, he still stood in place, pinching his palm with his fingertips, unable to calm down. She is here today for the final work handover. In fact, even if Qiao Fu didn't say anything, she knew that it was impossible to stay in Mingyu Yunchuang any longer. She has no intention of doing unnecessary struggle at work. During the period of being suspended at home, she thought a lot and did a lot, just to make the last effort for her relationship with Yu Xingzhou. But last night, when she discovered that there were dozens of photos of Shuyi hidden in Yu Xingzhou's phone, she finally understood that there was no relationship between her and Yu Xingzhou. What Yu Xingzhou loves most is money. The second favorite is Shuyi. When the lies were shattered and Yu Xingzhou found that Qin couldn't give him what he wanted, Shuyi returned to the number one position in his heart. The quarrel, tears, and Yu Xingzhou's unfeeling last night replayed in Qin mind one by one, and he couldn't get rid of it. She still remembered that when Yu Xingzhou shook off her hand last night, she chased him out tearfully and asked him if he wanted to go back to Shuyi. Yu Xingzhou didn't speak, but his expression already showed everything. Qin felt pitiful and ridiculous. The poor one is herself, who paved herself with lies, a dream full of deceit. The ridiculous thing is Yu Xingzhou. Why did he think that Shuyi would come back to him with Shi Yan? But Yu Xingzhou didn't think so. With a hoarse voice, he vowed that Shuyi still had him in his heart and would forgive him, even if he was with Shi Yan. It was to anger him. For a moment, Qin believed what Yu Xingzhou said. She herself was forced to be beyond recognition by love, wouldn't Shuyi? If it is really what Yu Xingzhou said. The word hate because of love is vividly interpreted in Qin body. She was hurt so badly by Yu Xingzhou, it was her own fault. But she couldn't accept that Yu Xingzhou could return to the original track of happiness after hurting her. Emotions surged up for a moment. Qin didn't think about anything. He turned around and chased after Shi Yan's car. She stood, took a few deep breaths, and knocked on the car window. "Mr. Shi, I have something to tell you." The window was open, and the man in the car didn't look up, but he didn't leave either. Qin clenched his sleeves where Shi Yan couldn't see, but his face was calm and calm. "My boyfriend, no, it should be his ex-boyfriend," she said with sore cheeks. "He still misses Shuyi, do you know?" "So what if I know?" Shi Yan closed the folder in his hand, looked up at her. "So what if I don't know?" Qin originally prepared some speeches, but Shi Yan's 2 sentences blocked his throat, and he couldn't utter a single word. Through the half-opened car window, Qin could only see half of Shi Yan's face, and the eyes behind the lens were not warm. "You probably don't know me very well. I'm not a very good person and I'm very selfish. If you continue to rush to find me unhappy, I will settle the old and new grudges with you for Shuyi. Do you understand?" At this moment, Jiangqing International Airport is extremely busy, and pedestrians come and go in a hurry. Shuyi dragged the suitcase to find Shi Yan's car in the parking lot, but only saw the driver Fan Lei alone. "Only you?" Shuyi asked. "Yeah." Fan Lei got out of the car to help her carry her luggage. "I'll do it." She didn't have any hostility towards Qin real uncle, and she didn't have any unnecessary friendship. After saying thank you, she got in the car and took out her mobile phone to send a message to Shi Yan. "Shuyi, what about you? Time banquet, there is something." She sent an "oh" in disappointment. She thought that Shi Yan really missed her a lot, but it turned out that she was just flirting. After putting away her mobile phone, Shuyi slept all the way home, and when she got off the car, it was already dark. Because the box was heavy, Fan Lei helped her carry it up the stairs. After coming out, Fan Lei didn't leave immediately, but stood by the side of the road, lit a cigarette, and looked around idly. Looking at it, he saw Yu Xingzhou, who was in a daze. He seemed to have drunk too much, and his footsteps were a little sloppy. Fan Lei even forgot to smoke, and watched Yu Xingzhou walk into the community. When the smoke burned to the end, his fingers were burned as soon as he moved, and the pain made him feel more irritable. No matter what Qin Lizhi did, she was his niece after all. He can scold her and teach her a lesson, but he doesn't want to see other men hurt her like this. When he thought of Qin Lizhi crying in front of him, his resentment towards Yu Xingzhou couldn't stop. So, without thinking too much, he rushed up from behind, grabbed Yu Xingzhou, and greeted him with crackling fists. Yu Xingzhou was stunned by his beating, and before he realized what happened, Fan Lei walked away. He was afraid that this would force the police to call the police, and he would spend half a day in the police station if the gain outweighed the loss. But back in the car, Fan Lei still felt hesitant. Thinking about it, he couldn't make Yu Xingzhou feel better. So when he sent a text message to Shi Yan, he added a sentence. In the restaurant box, a table of people chatted in full swing, and more than half of the drinks were gone. During the staggering of toasts, everyone passed the cups, and the olive branches in the conversation were thrown to Shi Yan one by one. He is the protagonist tonight, so he is also the one who drinks the most. Even so, while dealing with it, Shi Yan took the time to look at his phone. Fan Lei, Miss Xing has been sent home. Fan Lei, but I saw his ex-boyfriend sneaking around her door. Shi Yan's wine glass was suddenly placed on the table, and a few drops of wine were spilled. Small gestures attract everyone's attention. Under everyone's gaze, Shi Yan got up and said with a smile, "I'll stay with you for 30 minutes. Before everyone recovered, Shi Yan left his seat. After Shuyi packed her luggage, her stomach growled with hunger. She rummaged at home for a long time. The refrigerator was empty as if it had been swept away, and there was only a bag of potato chips in the cabinet for urgent needs. After taking a few mouthfuls, Shuyi felt even hungrier, and collapsed on the sofa, staring at the ceiling motionless. After more than 10 minutes, the doorbell finally rang. Shuyi ran to open the door without even wearing slippers. Then it was Yu Xingzhou standing at the door. The moment she saw him, Shuyi subconsciously wanted to close the door. Yu Xingzhou also expected her reaction and grabbed the door frame. The moment the door was about to be closed, Shuyi let go. She didn't want to pinch Yu Xingzhou's hand off and have to lose money. "Are you crazy?" Seeing that he was still pawing at the door, Shuyi couldn't help kicking him, but he didn't dodge. "What do you want? Let me tell you, Yu Xingzhou, what you call breaking and entering a private house, I can call the police." Calligraphy. Yu Xingzhou reeked of alcohol, the corners of his mouth were torn, and there were a few traces of blood. To describe him at this time, saying that he was in a mess, would be considered an understatement. His voice was hoarse, like a drunk who had a hangover all night. "I'm sorry for you, I know I'm sorry for you." Shuyi tugged on the door a few more times, but he couldn't get it open, so he gave up. Competing brute force with a man who is 1.8 meters tall is overestimating one's abilities. She took a deep breath and tried to calm herself down. "Is it okay to go to church to repent? My place is not a shelter." Yu Xingzhou didn't seem to believe that she was so heartless. He stared at her for a while, his eyes were red, and the knuckles of his hand holding the door frame were turning white. "Shuyi, do you really have no feelings for me at all?" Shuyi opened his mouth and was about to speak when he heard footsteps. Urgent, heavy. Shuyi had a premonition. The premonition has not been clarified yet. Shi Yan's figure has appeared in front of his eyes. He strode forward, carrying the wind in the corridor. Before he could stop, he had already waved Yu Xingzhou's hand on the door, and walked straight past him into Shuyi's house. With a bang, the door was closed. Yu Xingzhou didn't even have time to see who it was. Shuyi didn't realize what happened, so Shi Yan pulled her hand and turned around, directly leaning against the door. He didn't even want to take a few more steps, and the kiss with a strong alcohol smell fell down involuntarily. As strong as he was when he entered the door, his kiss was so overbearing that there was no room for Shuyi to respond. He just wanted to plunder arbitrarily. When Shuyi came back to his senses, he was still thinking that Yu Xingzhou was outside the door. There is only one wall between them, and the door is usually not very soundproof, so the natural sense of shame came from all directions, and she felt that Yu Xingzhou could clearly hear the sound of their kissing. So, she whimpered and pushed the time. Shi Yan frowned. Instead, he cut her restless hands behind her head and firmly pressed against the door. The smell of alcohol poured in one after another, stirring aggressively. Shuyi was so kissed that he fainted, softened, and was about to lose consciousness. What Yu Xingzhou is not Yu Xingzhou. If you hear it, you can hear it. If you see it, you can see it. The suffocation caused by poor breathing made the corners of Shuyi's eyes wet. In Shi Yan's scorching breath, she closed her eyes and began to respond to him. But at this moment, Shi Yan suddenly stopped. His kiss lingered on the corners of Shuyi's lips, and he spoke in a persuasive tone in the most gentle voice. Do you like me? Shuyi finally took a deep breath and nodded repeatedly. Like, she felt that if she didn't answer, she might die of shock today. Shi Yan let go of his hand slowly and brushed her chin instead. How much do you like it? Shuyi didn't know why, but his voice became hoarse, and he could only say in a breathy voice, I like you the most. But Shi Yan didn't seem satisfied with this answer. He held her lips again, another breathless kiss. With heavy breathing, Shi Yan lifted Shuyi's chin, forcing her to look at him. Say, you only like me. Chapter 53. The moon shyly hid in the clouds, and the wind tonight was also exceptionally gentle. It quietly passed through the porch, trying to blow the woman's long hair, but it was cut off by the man's shoulders. Under the shackles of Shi Yan, the breaths of the two intertwined, as strong as a scorching summer day. She pinched Shuyi's waist and waited patiently for her answer when she was drunk. But Shuyi's vision is blurred, and the person in front of him is hazy. She opened her mouth and sobbed under Shi Yan's gaze, I only like you, I only like you. In exchange for a light kiss. Completely different from the arrogance just now, Shi Yan lingered between her lips, and even the fingertips moved emotionally, passing through her long hair, stroking again and again. The night wind finally blew Shuyi from between his fingers. The wind was very cool, but his kiss was very hot. The place where it passed was like an electric shock. It was crisp and numb, making Shuyi's throat uncontrollably overflow with soft moans. The voice made Shuyi feel ashamed, but he couldn't restrain himself, and even stroked the side of his neck with his hands naturally. After a long time, Shi Yan's lips parted, and when he raised his head, Shuyi realized that his eyes were blurred, and the drunkenness could not even cover the cold mirror frame. I really drank a lot. He closed his eyes and let out a "huh" in his nasal cavity. That's it. Why did Shuyi feel that he heard a feeling of I have read it and I understand from his And Shi Yan stared at her with lowered eyes. Those eyes lost their usual coldness because of the drunkenness, and the eyelashes were lightly fanned, but they were not gentle and lingering gazes. Like a scorching hand, touching her skin inch by inch every time it passed, it was like staring directly at her naked. Shuyi was so embarrassed by his eyes that he had nowhere to hide, as if standing naked in front of him. She let go of her arms around him, and slowly slid down against the cold door. After relieving the burning sensation in her palms, she lowered her head and said in a low voice, What are you looking at? I'm watching. Shi Yan raised her chin, and looked at her carefully. Look at the way you are dazzled by the kiss, and your hair is messy. The voice was very soft, but Shuyi's breathing became disordered in an instant. He wiped the corner of Shuyi's eyes with his other hand. There are still tears. Being kissed to tears is nothing to be proud of. Shuyi turned her face away. Her breath was still not so smooth, different from the suffocation feeling just now. At this moment she felt that her chest was full of hot breath, leaving only a trace of disordered breath slowly squeezed out to keep awake. And Shi Yan's cell phone kept vibrating. 20 minutes had passed since Shi Yan left the banquet, and Qin Xing kept reminding him. Shi Yan's hand slid down to Shuyi's chin, holding her cheek, and said in a low voice, Wait for me to come back. Shuyi blinked. You want to go? Shi Yan, you don't want me to go. After the thunder and earth fire, Shuyi's consciousness came back, and he finally realized that Shi Yan's sudden appearance might not be accidental, but he must have something to do, so he rushed over halfway. The smell of alcohol all over her body should be socializing. No. Shuyi pushed his chest. Go, I'm going to sleep. Don't sleep, wait for me. He looked up at the door behind Shuyi, and his tone sank. Don't open the door for strangers, do you hear me? Stranger. Shuyi gritted her teeth to ensure that she would not laugh out loud. Understood, you can go now. In the corridor outside the door, Yu Xingzhou hadn't left yet. For the past 10 minutes, he stood quietly at the door, and finally realized later, he remembered who the man who suddenly appeared was. He couldn't see the heat inside, but as a man, he knew very well what it meant for another man to rush into a woman's house at night, smelling of alcohol, and shut the door tightly. He could only force himself not to imagine. However, the occasional small sound from the door was like a bomb button, and with a slight movement, it broke his self-deception with a bang, and the picture behind the door seemed to be vividly presented in front of his eyes. Imagination is always more exhausting than seeing it with your own eyes. Yu Xingzhou seemed to feel that the voices with lust seemed to cover the sky, lingering in his ears, and couldn't go away. He couldn't tell whether it was an auditory hallucination or real. His mind was buzzing, and he was about to lose his feet. Just then, the door opened. Quiet, calm. Nothing seemed to happen inside. Yu Xingzhou crazily hypnotized himself. Nothing happened. He heaved a sigh of relief, and when Shi Yan came out, he closed the door without leaving any time lag, before Yu Xingzhou could look past him and look inside the door. Immediately afterwards, Shi Yan walked towards him step by step. At the same time, she raised her hand and slowly wiped her lower lip with her thumb, wiping off the remaining lipstick marks. Because of that touch of red, those imaginary pictures appeared in front of Yu Xingzhou more realistically than before. Yu Xingzhou forced himself to look away, but saw his messy friend again. Don't appear in front of her again. Shi Yan's voice was not loud, but it fell on Yu Xingzhou's head like a heavy hammer. Is it okay? This is not a tone of discussion. But Yu Xingzhou has nothing now. He has nothing more to lose. The only one who can catch him is Shuyi. With the former friendship, alcohol was causing trouble. Yu Xingzhou felt that he had nothing to care about. After all, now he is the one with bare feet. I'm with her. It's over long ago. When Shi Yan interrupted him, he approached with 2 steps. If you have any other ideas. Shi Yan is in a good mood now, willing to present the facts to Yu Xingzhou and try to convince others with reasoning. It's best to cancel it in time. Under the explicit instruction of the remaining lipstick, Yu Xingzhou had no room to speak. Shi Yan smiled and pushed Yu Xingzhou to the point where he had nowhere to retreat. Let me see you entangle her again. I really don't guarantee what I will do. Whether to avoid the law or not, I have plenty of ways to make you live like a dog for the rest of your life. Yu Xingzhou's arms trembled. He was sober, and he clearly felt the undisguised threat from Shi Yan. Go away, don't let me help you. Inside the door, the draft whistled past, blowing away the smell of wine left by the banquet. But his aura seemed to be still filling the narrow space of the entrance. Shuyi leaned against the wall, still immersed in the atmosphere just now. She doesn't smile, but the muscles at the corners of her mouth don't listen to her central nervous system at all. After sticking to the wall for a while, the doorbell suddenly rang. Shuyi turned around and opened the door. Come here so soon. Delivery guy. Shuyi's smile froze at the corner of his mouth, and he stared at the delivery boy. The takeaway boy felt that even though he was late for more than 10 minutes due to a small accident on the road, why did the customers look hungry and stupid? First of all, I wish you a happy holiday, and then I'm sorry, I'm late on the road except for accidents. Can you stop complaining to me? I will send you red envelopes. Fine. Shuyi took the takeaway from him and said with a smile, happy holidays to you too. Delivery guy. I am a man, what is so happy about Women's Day? I'm afraid I'm really hungry and stupid. Shuyi returned to the dining room, her stomach growled twice. But she felt that she was not so hungry anymore, so she opened the box slowly, and saw that the shopkeeper forgot her note and put chopped scallions, but she didn't care, and picked them out one by one with great patience. The phone on the table vibrated suddenly. Shuyi took a look and turned on the speakerphone. My flight arrives in Jiangqing tomorrow night. Bai Ruoshan said in a hurry, you are ready to pick up the driver. Shuyi picked up 2 chopped green onions with chopsticks, raised the corners of his mouth, and put on a gesture. Don't come, I don't have time to accompany you. Bai Ruoshan, why are you so busy? Don't pretend to me. Shuyi muttered in a low voice, I'm busy with dating. However, Bai Ruoshan only took Shuyi's words as a deaf ear, and opened her mouth like a machine gun. It's really unlucky that Shuyi is too difficult to deal with. She insists on sending someone from our company to interview, and those who don't know think it's a big name A star. Shuyi is the internet celebrity alumnus that Bai Ruoshan asked Shuyi to help contact some time ago. Although Shuyi found her contact information, but had no contact with her, she directly gave Bai Ruoshan the WeChat account. Although we haven't contacted each other now, We can still be regarded as classmates in the same department. They all live on the first floor. It really doesn't give me any face. Wait, what did you just say? Shuyi, I said I'm busy with dating, so don't bother me. Who bothers you? I don't live in your house. Look at your face. Bai Ruishan frowned for a second. Why didn't I realize that you were so forgetful of friends before? Recalling just now, Shuyi felt her cheeks burning, but she still had to pretend that her face was not flushed and her heart was beating. Maybe it's because I wasn't sexy enough before. Bai Ruishan was about to suffocate. You are enough, I don't want to hear it. That being said, Bai Ruishan was still curious. Who? Shi Yan. Shuyi, why not? Bai Ruishan let out a long sigh on the other end of the phone. This damn mouse was hit by your blind cat. Shuyi coughed. Who are you talking about, dead mice? Who are you talking about, blind cats? I didn't say anyone, I just said it casually. After the shock, Bai Ruishan still had more desire to gossip than complain. Didn't you just come back from the United States tonight? When did you confirm the relationship? Sure, relationship. Shuyi thought about it for a while. She was so fascinated by the kiss, she didn't seem to say anything until Shi Yan left. Hearing Shuyi's silence, Bai Ruishan let out a giggle. No way, sister, it doesn't matter for sure. Are you unilaterally dating? What do you know? Shuyi gasped and said, aren't you all students now? Whoever plays that kind of thing, tonight dash. She stopped suddenly. What's the matter? Bai Ruishan chased after her. What do you think? Well, how, this kind of thing can be explained in detail with a single dog. Shuyi's silence gave Bai Ruishan unlimited room for imagination. Damn it, Shuyi, you're amazing, just hit a home run. How come I didn't realize you were so wild before? If I knew it was so easy to take him down, what effort did you put in before? What nonsense are you talking about? Shuyi hastily interrupted her. We just kiss, do you understand? Kiss. With the level of imagination just now, Bai Ruishan instantly felt that kissing was just a side dish of porridge. She curled her lips dully. Okay, then do you still have time to call me now? What about others? Shuyi, let's go. Bai Ruishan was very surprised. Just left. I have something to do. Shuyi said with a little pride, come find me on the way. Bai Ruishan, tisk. Shuyi immediately added, I'll be back in a while. Bai Ruishan smiled and said, come to your house. Shuyi, yes. Bai Ruishan, tisk. Shuyi, are you finished? What are you talking about? It's nothing, just to remind you, is the family prepared? Bai Ruishan's tone was narrow and pointed. Don't take maternity leave at the end of the year when you are rushing to improve your performance. What are you talking about? I'm not joking with you, otherwise, what would people come to your house for at night? Okay, you give me the flight information, and I will pick you up tomorrow night. Shuyi hung up the phone hastily in order to hide his distracted mind, but when eating, his mind was filled with the tone and demeanor of Shi Yan when he left. His breath lingered in her ears, with the smell of alcohol a little hot, and said over and over again, don't sleep, wait for me. Shuyi didn't know that her cheeks were blushing again. I don't want to think about it anymore, but I can't help it, like aftertaste, greedy for every minute and every second of that time. This takeaway took more than half an hour to finish. Shuyi simply cleaned up the table, sat down at the desk and prepared to read the materials for a while, but she couldn't calm down at all. For a while, Shi Yan's phrase, don't sleep, wait for me, and for a while, Bai Ruishan's, don't take maternity leave at the end of the year when you want to improve your performance. The voices of the two of them circulated alternately in her ears like magic sounds, which had a very brainwashing effect. Shuyi put on his coat without knowing it and walked to the entrance. Opening the door, a gust of wind blew. She was a little sober, but she was still driven to open the door by an emotion that she didn't know whether it was rationality or impulsiveness. What if the beastly behavior is too big to be a human being? Shuyi scratched his head and walked out furtively. However, as soon as she took a step out, she looked up and saw Shi Yan getting out of the elevator and walking towards her. Shuyi. She retracted her foot guiltily. However, it still did not escape the eyes of Shi Yan. Instead, he stopped, looked at the neatly dressed Shuyi slowly, and asked, where do you want to go? Shuyi looked at him blankly. I want to go to your heart. Not knowing if it was an illusion, Shuyi felt that she saw a speechless expression on Shi Yan's face. He walked straight towards her house, took her by the hand and pulled her in. Seeing his posture as if he was going back to his own home, Shuyi suddenly became angry and grabbed his wrist and refused to move. When Shi Yan turned his head and lowered his eyes to look over, the light above him faintly reflected the drunkenness in his eyes. Thicker than before. Shuyi could feel the heat of his palm, but she didn't know how much wine he was given because he was absent from company for the 30 minutes. "What's wrong?" Shi Yan asked. Shuyi looked at him with a smile on his lips and obvious hints in his eyes. "Who are you? You will come into my house." "Shi Yan, I am your landlord." "Shuyi, is this community also his property?" Seeing her sluggish look, Shi Yan felt that he was even more incapable of drinking. He lowered his head, approached Shuy's neck, and took a deep breath. "Aren't you going to my heart?"
Welcome to Storyverse. If you have any novels you'd like to see or stories you'd like to share, feel free to leave us a comment or send us a private message. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join our community of avid readers and romance enthusiasts.
Chapter 54. Shuyi stood still, with his hands hanging by his trousers, quietly letting Shi Yan lean on him, letting the smell of alcohol spread all over his body. At this moment, Shuyi felt that he had drunk too much, otherwise how could he stand here stupidly like a statue? After a long time, Shi Yan had no intention of moving, and seemed to be attached to her aura. Shuyi was itched and nervous by his breath. Obviously nothing was done, but the air became lingering. Shuyi slowly raised his hand, and after a while, it landed on Shi Yan's back. "How much did you drink?" Shi Yan thought Shuyi was urging him, raised his head, and rubbed his neck. "Not much." After speaking, he walked straight in. Shuyi was stunned for half a second before following him in. Closing the door in a panic, Shi Yan had already unbuttoned his coat, half lying on her sofa as if returning to his own home, and took the cigarette with him. The wine-smelling coat was thrown to the other side in disgust. "Shuyi, it's nothing out of the ordinary." Shuyi stood in the living room of her home, but was a little overwhelmed by Shi Yan's operation. After looking around for a while, she slowly walked to the sofa, squatted down, and leaned her hands on Shi Yan's face. "Drunk?" Shi Yan slowly opened his eyes and looked sideways at her. "Somewhat." Shuyi's impulsiveness came from somewhere, tentatively reached out, and touched his glasses. She heard people say that people who wear glasses for a long time don't like others to touch their glasses. If they are taken off rashly, they will feel a strong sense of insecurity. But Shuyi felt that she was also infected by Shi Yan's drunkenness, and she was so cowardly that she slowly took off his glasses. She just wanted to see what he looked like without his glasses while he was drunk. And Shi Yan just looked at Shuyi like this. His eyes, smudged by alcohol, looked deeper than usual. Dim, but bright spotlight, looking straight at her. Shuyi suddenly blushed and felt his heart pounding, and put his glasses back on him at a loss. "Then explain your behavior yourself. I just want to see if you can see clearly after taking off your glasses." She asked, "What's your degree?" "Shi Yan, 405. Shuyi didn't listen to him carefully at all. Anyway, she nodded after reporting the number. "Oh, it's so tall, you can't see clearly without wearing glasses, right?" Shi Yan slowly closed his eyes, then opened them again. "It's enough to see you clearly." "Shuyi, what happened to this man who drank too much? How to become another person?" But she quite likes this strange time now. Shuyi pursed his smile, and moved a little closer. His breath was no longer far from him, and then he reached out and poked his chin. "When you wake up tomorrow, will you still remember what happened today?" Shi Yan's eyes were half opened, with a slight smile on his face. Without the usual alienation, he just smiled and raised his eyes. Shuyi felt that he looked like a goblin at the moment. The goblin still asked in a calm voice in her ear, "What happened today?" Shuyi blushed and said nothing. Shi Yan hooked her chin, "Say it." Shuyi figured it out after that moment of embarrassment. The thing was done by him, not by her, so there was nothing to say. So Shuyi propped up his arms and leaned over the time banquet, using his posture to create his aura. "You kissed me forcefully today, do you know that?" Shi Yan did not show the expression Shuyi imagined. With a smile on the corner of his mouth, his index finger slowly brushed Shuy's lower lip. "Forced kiss. Don't you enjoy it?" Shuyi, under Shi Yan's scorching gaze, her face was reddened visibly again. Gosh, others are out of line when they are drunk. Shi Yan is the second personality when he is drunk. "Shi Yan," Shuyi waved his index finger in front of his eyes, "are you Shi Yan?" Shi Yan closed his eyes, and let out a in his nasal cavity. Seeing that he answered even such a boring question, Shuyi became jealous, stared at him, and said in a seductive tone, "Call me baby." After finishing speaking, Shi Yan did not respond. Shuyi's heart turned into courage, pinched his face, and repeated, "Call me baby." Under Shuyi's gaze, Shi Yan's eyes slowly opened, blurred and seductive. He opened his thin lips slightly, and whispered to Shuyi with an airy voice, "Baby," with a hint of alcohol. It was light, but it got straight into Shuyi's ears. "When you have a heart, you have a gall. The thief is gone." Shuy's breathing couldn't find the rhythm when he called out baby, and he tightened his hands on the sofa. His will sank in his eyes a little bit. "Will you really remember what you said tomorrow?" Shuyi said with some confusion. "Will you wake up and become that dead again?" Shi Yan smiled. "Don't you also like the dead look?" Shuyi. If she could, she would like to treat alcohol as a drip every day for Shi Yan. "I don't care." Shuyi lowered his brows. "If you don't admit it tomorrow, I will write an article to expose you from beginning to end." Shi Yan was still smiling, but the aggression in his eyes appeared again. "Then leave some evidence." At the same time as the voice fell, Shuy's waist was suddenly hooked by him, pulled down, and the whole body lay on him. She was originally leaning against the sofa, but when she lay down like this, her head was buried on Shi Yan's shoulder. "You." Just after saying a word, Shuyi felt a wet touch on the side of his neck. She straightened her body in an instant, maintaining the current posture, without moving. Immediately after the gentle kiss, that small piece of skin felt intermittent pain. He was nibbling and sucking. Shuyi. She clenched her hands tightly, not knowing what to do. Obviously, he is very afraid of pain, but he didn't push him away. While suffering from pain, he also felt a strange sense of comfort. In a beautiful room, the air flows extremely slowly, sinking and floating in the sound of the two people's breathing. There are sporadic lights in the night outside the window, flickering. Shuy's brows stretched and furrowed according to the feeling on his neck. She lost the measure of the passage of time, and after an unknown amount of time, Shi Yan's lips left her neck, and her fingers brushed over the marks left by him. "This is evidence, keep it." Shi Yan's voice lingered hoarsely in Shuy's ears, and she felt as if she was being burned by fire, submerged in sea water, and could hardly breathe in the next second. So she immediately struggled to get up, but Shi Yan reached out and pressed her head, letting her lean on his chest. "Don't move, hug for a while." His words were like a spell, and Shuyi immediately stopped moving. She lay quietly on Shi Yan's body, only the sound of each other's breathing could be heard in the surrounding area. The burning sensation on the neck still hasn't gone away. As Shi Yan's chest rose and fell, Shuy's breathing also fluctuated slowly and quickly. Obviously, the one who drank too much was Shi Yan, but she felt that she was the one who was completely intoxicated. But getting along quietly at close range, Shuyi felt that Shi Yan seemed a little uncomfortable. She opened her eyes and checked his expression. "Uncomfortable." Shi Yan didn't speak. Shuyi stood up slowly, and Shi Yan didn't stop her this time. He was really thinking about him, and he wanted to give himself a space to calm down. "I'll get you something sober." Shuyi usually doesn't like to drink, and even if he does, he can control it, so there is no glucose or the like at home. There is a lot of honey. She went to the kitchen and started to make a cup of honey. White smoke billowed from the cup, and when stirring, Shuyi frequently lost his mind. From time to time, he touched his hot cheeks. If there is a mirror at this moment, she thought, she should look like a spring heart. Then Shi Yan couldn't see it. So Shuyi stirred a cup of honey water for 10 minutes. When she came out with it, she glanced at the full-length mirror at the entrance from the corner of her eye, and her mind suddenly moved. In the living room, Shi Yan was lying on the sofa with his eyes closed. Shuyi took the honey water and slowly moved to the entrance. She raised her head, and from the corner of the living room, she saw the mark on her neck. The scene in the memory came again, and it was vividly reproduced with a sense of touch and hearing. Shuyi didn't know where to put his empty hand. After a long while, he slowly lifted it up and touched his neck. When she was immersed in herself in the mirror and couldn't extricate herself, she suddenly saw a figure appearing behind her. Shi Yan came out at some point, with a coat in his hand. He was standing right behind Shuyi. Through the mirror, the two met their eyes in a strange way. "You've been standing here for 10 minutes, what are you doing?" Shuyi said blankly, "I'm admiring my beauty." After finishing speaking, Shuyi didn't feel ashamed and panicked. Anyway, there is no need to reason with a drunk person. But when Shi Yan heard this sentence, he didn't respond or move. He leaned half against the wall, staring at Shuyi in the mirror with rippling eyes. The two stood in this weird tandem position for a long time. Shuyi was a little confused. What are you doing here again? Shi Yan looked at her in the mirror and said lightly, I'm admiring your beauty. Shuyi. When I said the same sentence, my face didn't blush or my heart beat. When it came out of Shi Yan's mouth, with a slightly frivolous tone, once it was exaggerated by the atmosphere of being alone, the words immediately changed their taste. Shuyi stuffed him with honey water. Drink some, sober up. But Shi Yan picked up the cup, tilted his head slightly, and drank it in one gulp, but his eyes were lowered, looking straight at Shuyi, and there seemed to be a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. His Adam's apple rolled up and down, but his gaze remained motionless, as if locked on Shuyi's body. Her shadow was reflected in the flickering light. The eyes are not so pure, and the meaning is unclear, as if they are conveying some meaning paradoxically. Shuyi's face was on fire when he saw it. Other men get angry when they drink too much. Shi Yan drank too much. Hair, affection. Shuyi took a step back and said, have you seen enough? Enough is enough. Shi Yan casually put the cup on the side cabinet. Shuyi noticed that he was holding the coat, so he asked, are you leaving? You don't want me to go? Even though his eyes were still blurred, his voice, moistened with honey, spoke much more normally. Do you want to keep me overnight? No. Shuyi turned her back to him, her voice was soft, I'm considering whether to send you out. After all, if you drink like this, if you get lost, I won't have a boyfriend. After finishing speaking, Shuyi remained silent, but listened carefully to the reactions of the people behind him. If he said, your performance is not good, you don't have a boyfriend, then Shuyi may appear in today's statement tomorrow. Why do female financial reporters kill the CEO? Because of money or love? When her mind was full of legal images, Shi Yan's hand passed behind her ear, held her chin, and squeezed it gently. It won't make you without a boyfriend. Shuyi was stunned for 2 seconds, then smiled and rolled his eyes where he couldn't see. However, when he pushed open the door, Shuyi suddenly pulled him back. Wait a minute, give me your phone. Shi Yan took out the phone according to his words, unlocked it, and handed it to her. Holding the phone, Shuyi turned around again, and changed her notes on Shi Yan's WeChat. This was not enough, she turned to her phone number again, did the same thing, then turned off the phone and returned it to Shi Yan. Okay, let's go. Early the next morning. Breakfast is already set on the table in the dining room on the first floor. Shi's family's tastes are bland, and last night Shi Yan felt uncomfortable in his stomach, so the aunt specially prepared porridge and side dishes for him. When everyone was at the table, Shuyi still had her head down, her hair was disheveled, she couldn't open her eyes, and she was about to fall asleep in a second. Suddenly, the phone on the table vibrated. Shuyui's limbs were awake before her brain. She reached out for the phone, and when she was about to press the answer button, her eyes widened. Kiss baby. Her spirit finally returned to her body and realized that it was not her phone. This is the scariest thing. Because apart from her, there were only 3 people at the table, Shi Yan, Qin Xiaoming, and Shi Wenguang. Qin Shuyi raised her head suddenly, and was about to ask whose cell phone it was, when she met Shi Yan's dark eyes. Qin Shuyi. With a bang, the phone fell back on the table. However, when Shi Yan took the phone away without changing his face, Qin Shuyi asked almost reflexively, who is your dear baby? After the words fell, even Qin Xiaoming and Shi Wenguang looked at Shi Yan together. In full view of everyone, Shi Yan looked at Qin Shuyi coldly. Qin Shuyi shrank her neck and said in a low voice, pretend I didn't ask. Then, Shi Yan answered the phone with a blank expression. Shuyi's voice came. Are you awake? Shi Yan, get up. Shuyi, have you eaten yet? Shi Yan glanced at the eyes of everyone looking at him and said calmly, I'm eating. Shuyi, really, as soon as he sobered up, he turned into that dead look again. After a moment of silence. Shi Yan, anything else? Shuyi, not anymore. She hung up the phone directly. A busy tone came from the handset. Shi Yan frowned and put down the phone. The 2 men at the table were still looking at him. Qin Xiaoming suddenly chuckled and looked away. Shi Wenguang cleared his throat and asked, girlfriend? Shi Yan, yes. Qin Shuyui's desire to survive suddenly disappeared, her eyes lit up suddenly, and she asked everyone's heartfelt thoughts, why didn't you find that you were so tired and crooked before, little uncle? You even kissed the little baby, ha 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 ha, kissed the little one foot. Shi Yan put down his chopsticks and looked at her with a smile. Your stomach doesn't hurt anymore. Qin Shuyui's laughter stopped abruptly, and she felt a breath of death. She blinked guiltily, It's okay, thank you uncle for your concern. Shi Yan, then you go back to work. Qin Shuriwe. After dinner, Shi Yan left home and went to Mingyu headquarters building. After getting in the car, he answered a call from Chen Sheng, and then checked out WeChat. Sure enough, Zheng Shuyi's note also became Kiss Baby. He couldn't remember when it happened, but he could only be sure that it was definitely not his handwriting. He stared at the phone screen, sighed, and then dialed the number of Kiss Baby. The other party took a long time to pick up, and the tone was very cold. What? Shi Yan, going to work? Zheng Shuyi, yes. When Shi Yan heard the background sound, it was a little noisy, and asked again, where are you? Zheng Shuyi, wait for the bus. 3 sentences, each sentence should not exceed 2 words. Shi Yan was a little irritable and a little helpless. He softened his tone, and there was coaxing in his voice that he didn't even notice. What's wrong with you? It's heating up again today. Zheng Shuyi was wearing a high-necked bottoming shirt, standing under the sun, sweating all over his neck. And the instigator still had the face to ask her what's the matter. It's nothing, I was just thinking about a problem. Shi Yan, what? My boyfriend is too cold. I reflected on it. It should be my problem. I should have found a less aloof boyfriend. Chapter 55. There was a few seconds of silence on the phone. At this moment, Zheng Shuyi couldn't see Shi Yan's expression, but she could feel that the man's face was probably darkened. But Zheng Shuyi was very happy. This man was drunk at her house last night and took advantage of her crazily. Although she still likes him to occupy. No, she likes him to drink like crazy. But the next day, as soon as he woke up from the wine, he turned into a calm and self-sustaining dead look, trying to pretend that he didn't know anything. How could there be such a good thing in this world? If he didn't give him any color, he thought he had found such a virtuous girlfriend. In the busy morning, there are whistles and the radio of the breakfast shop nearby, which is noisy and full of fireworks. After a while of silence, Shi Yan suddenly said, "Don't move, I'll be waiting at your door." The corners of Zheng Shuyi's mouth curled up, but he said, "I don't want it, it's so hot, I'm going to work." On the phone, Shi Yan's voice suddenly softened. "Shuyi, just wait for me there, okay?" Zheng Shuyi was taken aback for a moment, and when he heard his coaxing voice, he compromised very disappointingly. It seems that he is still very virtuous and kind. So she nodded to the air. "Hurry up, I'm going to die of heat. Why is it suddenly so hot today? It's only March, really, I don't know how hot it will be in summer." After listening to her rambling, Shi Yan hung up the phone. Zheng Shuyi found a cool place and stood quietly. Soon, Shi Yan's car appeared in front of her. The window was lowered, and he looked sideways. At this moment, Zheng Shuyi was so hot that his forehead was sweating, and he was complaining as he walked towards his car. "It's really hot, the climate is really getting worse these days." Shi Yan's voice came out along with the air conditioning in the car. "It's hot and still we're so much." Zheng Shuyi suddenly stopped and stared at Shi Yan rigidly. Just now he said that he was a human being, but when he opened his mouth, he still couldn't speak human words. Zheng Shuyi crossed his arms, and did not hide his sarcasm. "You have the nerve to talk about me. Why do you think I wear so many clothes? Do you know who did the good thing?" Shi Yan's eyes slowly fell on her neck. He propped his elbows on the car window, bent his index finger and pressed it against his chin, showing a leisurely look under the scorching sun. "What good did I do?" His voice was as clear as the air conditioning blowing from the car. But in Zheng Shuyi's ears, it was like a heat wave rolling by. "So you haven't forgotten? I'm not that bad at drinking." He looked Zheng Shuyi up and down, because his eyes were not serious, and even the words he said had no meaning. "I remember everything that should be remembered." Zheng Shuyi. She suddenly felt that her neck was very hot, and she stretched out her hand to scratch it unconsciously, as if she wanted to cover up something, but wanted to cover it up instead. Shi Yan leaned back in the chair and said flatly, "Get in the car." Zheng Shuyi didn't move, and said with great backbone, "Get out of the car." Shi Yan frowned suddenly, and looked at Zheng Shuyi impatiently. "What are you going to do again? You come down first." Although Zheng Shuyi's tone was a bit coquettish, she looked at him frankly, as if she had made some big moves after getting off the car. Shi Yan really didn't understand what she was struggling with between getting on and off the bus during this rush hour. People come and go around, commuters can't wait to trot all the way to catch the subway, but she stays here. Naturally, Shi Yan was not idle, but seeing Zheng Shuyi's smiling face, he still opened the car door. Walking in front of Zheng Shuyi in 2 steps, he turned sideways to block the bright sunlight shining on Zheng Shuyi's face. "What's wrong?" It's nothing. Shuyi stepped on his feet and slowly leaned into his ear, whispering mysteriously, I will get into the car with you after a kiss. In fact, Shuyi didn't mean to ask for a kiss when she said this, she did it on purpose. She just can't see Shi Yan's pretentious appearance in front of others, and wants to test a little bit, where is his bottom line. Anyway, she is not afraid of a small kiss in public, not a hug. Therefore, it was within her expectation that Shi Yan's answer was irrelevant. The two people's heads and necks intertwined. Standing like this, Shi Yan only needs to turn his head slightly to see Shuyi's earlobe. The skin is very fair, but the soft earlobe is red because of the hot weather. His breath beat against her ear, and he asked softly, why don't you wear earrings? I didn't see the right one in the morning, so I didn't want to. Wait, what kind of elusive question is this? Shuyi was about to raise his head when he suddenly felt a softness on his earlobe. Shi Yan kissed her earlobe lightly, tossing and turning, the tip of his tongue seemed to sweep it. As if getting an electric shock, Shuyi tightened his breathing instantly, and his fingertips curled up almost imperceptibly. She didn't know whether it was because Shi Yan kissed her lightly in such a posture that it looked like two people were whispering, which would not attract anyone's attention at all, or because it was his nature to directly tease her sensitive parts like this. In short, because of Shi Yan's actions, Shuyi's energy was lost all morning, his legs were limp, and he was about to lean on him in the next second. The noise on the road drifted to outer space in an instant, leaving only the sound of his own heartbeat in Shuyi's ears. Shi Yan raised his hand, clasped the back of her head, inserted his fingers into the black hair, and pressed gently. At the same time, without leaving his lips, he kissed her all the way along the pinna, and his voice became a whisper, can you come with me? Shuyi murmured, yes, yes. Then let's go. Shi Yan suddenly pulled away, glanced at her, then turned around and pulled her into the car. Why does Shuyi feel that in Shi Yan's tone and eyes just now? She tasted a sense of disgust that you have so many things, and finally solved them, while doing intimate things that are a bit erotic under the watchful eyes of the public without changing his face. At the same time, he dislikes her for asking too much. What kind of man with a split personality is this? After getting in the car, Shi Yan sat in the back with a dignified appearance, brushed off his neckline, then raised his head and closed his eyes. Shuyi. She felt even angrier. Shuyi leaned against the window on the right, separated from Shi Yan by the Yalu River, and looked back at him from time to time. He couldn't see it anyway. However, when Shuyi sneaked back for the third time, Shi Yan closed his eyes and said, don't look, let me sleep for a while. Shuyi, has this person opened his eyes? Who's watching you? Shuyi sneered, I'm staring at you. Shi Yan didn't seem to listen to her words at all, his eyes were still closed, and he seemed to be asleep. Last night, he couldn't stand the smell of tobacco and alcohol all over his body. When he returned home, after taking a shower, it was already late at night. However, the alcohol concentration in his body didn't completely drop to zero because of a good night's sleep. Until now, the after effects of the hangover still haven't completely dissipated. But after resting his eyes in the car for a while, he found that Shuyi was sitting beside her, and the smell of her usual perfume was faintly floating with her small movements. Even if she didn't speak or move, he couldn't calm down at all. Shi Yan let out a long sigh of relief, opened his eyes, and grabbed Shuyi's hand hanging by his leg without warning. Her hands are delicate and thin, with well-proportioned fingers, clean and round fingertips, and no nail polish, showing a pure and natural beauty. And it's so small that it fits in the palm of your hand when you hold it lightly. Shi Yan put on a posture of playing, and spread his hands again, slowly inserting his 10 fingers, clasping the hands of the two of them together. I'll pick you up after get off work today. Shuyi curled his lips and smiled, pretending to look out of the window, and said in a tone of chow, no time. For a long while, Shuyi, who was waiting for Shi Yan to coax him, didn't hear anything, but his hands were excited by his playing. Shuyi secretly looked sideways at him, seeing that he was contented, as if he didn't care about her one-man show at all. Suddenly feels so boring. Shuyi quickly withdrew her hand, lowered her head to pick at her nails, trying to cover up her twitching for herself. My friend's playing tonight, that's the one, the friend you met before, I'm going to pick her up. Shi Yan, did she come to play with you? No. Just as Shuyi was about to say that she came to work, the words by Ruoshan said to Shuyi when she first met Shi Yan a long time ago suddenly popped into her mind. Sister, you can fucking get this, I'll chop off my head on the spot. Thinking of this, Shuyi let out a chuckle, and stared at Shi Yan meaningfully. She came to show me beheading. Sometimes Shi Yan really doesn't understand if someone is flipping Shuyi's emotional switch repeatedly. A moment of anger, a moment of awkwardness, a moment of coquettishness, and a moment of self-serving laughter. But thinking of Bai Ruoshan's head beheading on the spot, Shuyi's previous petty emotions disappeared. She moved to Shi Yan's side, and tugged on his sleeve. Then you will accompany me to pick her up today. Shi Yan, no time. Shuyi, why does this man have a third personality that must be punished? Shuyi nodded, and said solemnly, yeah, okay, then I'll find a free boyfriend to accompany me. When Shi Yan heard these words, she was not annoyed, but turned her head to look at Shuyi quietly, with a smile on her lips. That being the case, Shuyi took this opportunity to express his dissatisfaction. I have a boyfriend who will say good morning and good night to me every day, and a boyfriend who will pick me up to and from get off work, and maybe bring flowers. There is also a boyfriend who will accompany me intimately when I need it. What about the most important boyfriend, who can coax me with nice words? Shi Yan let out a long oh. So many boyfriends. Yeah, why, what kind of eyes do you have? Shuyi said without changing his expression, are you envious eyes? I won't give you one. Unless you ask me. Please, Shi Yan finally said, but his tone was not so pleasant. Shut up. Because of tossing on the road for a while, Shuyi almost stepped on the company he ordered. As soon as he put down his bag, he was called into the conference room for a regular meeting. When it was over, Tang Yi leaned back on the swivel chair and said with a smile, March is here, everything is recovering, spring is warm and flowers are blooming, and the season of love is coming. Everyone should take advantage of this season to have a sweet love affair. Everyone was so shocked by Editor-in-Chief Tang's sudden impulsiveness that they didn't know how to respond. Only Shuyi cheered for her. Did the Editor-in-Chief have a boyfriend? Tang Yi straightened his hair and shook his head. I have my own arrangements for my life. I am worried about you. That's right. A few days ago, the boss of the internet company upstairs found me and wanted to have a fellowship with our department. She blinked at Shuyi. They asked you to participate by name, and I agreed to it. Will you give me this face? Shuyi nodded with a smile. How can I not give Editor-in-Chief Tang face? Tang Yi felt that Shuyi was very sensible, so he gave her an appreciative look. Immediately afterwards, Shuyi took out her mobile phone. I just have to ask my boyfriend if he agrees with me to participate. Tang Yi sat up straight, closed the computer. The meeting is over. As soon as he left the meeting room, Kong Nan immediately joined him. Are you in love again? Shuyi smiled without saying a word, and walked to the tea room. But Kong Nan had something to do and didn't have time to ask, so the two walked away separately. Due to a week-long business trip to the United States, Shuyi had a lot of work piled up in her hands. After returning to her workstation, she forgot the time when she got busy. After eating lunch in a hurry, I didn't even have time for the usual nap, so I went back to work in the afternoon. It wasn't until it was almost time to get off work that people in the office area began to fish one after another. Shuyi stood up and stretched his shoulders and neck. Then he brought a cup of hot water and stood by the window to browse moments for a while. One of them was from Qin Shuriwe, which was published 3 hours ago. In life, you are born to work. Mr. Lao, she is sincere. The accompanying picture is a photo of Lao Shi. Shuyi. It's nothing, the point is that she saw you like it. Shuyi sighed, and replied under this circle of friends. He didn't say that. I understand this feeling. Lu Sun, in a few seconds, Qin Shuriwe really deleted this circle of friends. Then she came to Shuyi crying. Qin Shuriwe, why didn't you say it earlier? TVT, I'm so ashamed. Shuyi, maybe he doesn't know either. Don't you think this is a praise for you? Qin Shuriwe, crying bitterly. JPG. Shuyi, promise me, don't pretend to be very literary in the circle of friends in the future, okay? You might as well post more selfies. Qin Shuriwe, oh. Shuyi, what's wrong with you? Qin Shuriwe, my little uncle is going to get me back to work again. After drinking the water, Shuyi sorted out the materials while sending a voice message to Qin Shuriwe. If you are told to go to work, go to work. Why are you young and not working at home? Qin Shuriwe, well, Sister Shuyi, why are you standing by my little uncle? After a few seconds, Qin Shuriwe asked and answered, you are really with my uncle. Qin Shuriwe's voice was too loud, and Shuyi subconsciously held the phone away from her ears. WeChat automatically switched to public release. At this time, Su Yuling passed by with a pile of materials. She had good ears, just in time to hear this sentence, and looked at Shuyi with shocked eyes. At this time, Shuyi was still smiling and typing on the phone. Shuyi, grin. Shuyi, keep a low profile. Su Yuling's eyes flashed, he turned his head thoughtfully, and continued walking towards the office. On the phone, Shuyi was even more shocked than before. Shuyi, I saw him note "kiss baby" to his girlfriend this morning, and thought it wasn't you. Shuyi, why do you think it's not me? Shuyi, does your little uncle have other women? Shuyi, he raises fish ponds. Shuyi, that's not what I mean, I just think how could such a disgusting remark be you? Shuyi, Shuyi, you are so dignified and intellectual, isn't it the remark you changed? Shuyi, of course not. Shuyi, I'll just say it, ha 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 ha, I didn't expect my little uncle to be so greasy and disgusting, vomit. Shuyi ignored Shuyi and sent a message to her crooked and disgusting boyfriend. Shuyi, I wonder if I will have a boyfriend who brings a bouquet of flowers to pick me up from get off work today. As soon as the news was sent out, Shi Yan called, go downstairs. Shuyi, have you arrived? Shi Yan, yes. Shuyi, if he had known, she would not have wasted time hinting at him. After packing up her things, Shuyi turned off the computer, told Kong Nan and left work. Since she came out early and the square outside the building was not crowded, Shuyi saw Shi Yan's car at a glance. When the banquet was over, he drove a 4-seater car without a driver. Shuyi trotted all the way to the front of the car, but was reserved, slowly opened the door, and sat in gracefully. Glancing at the co-pilot, it was indeed empty. Shuyi snorted, didn't say anything, and after fastening his seat belt, he said, Master, go to Jiangqing International Airport T2, thank you. Shi Yan looked at her coldly, what are you performing? Shuyi lowered her head and fiddled with her hair without even looking at him, and said in a moaning voice, if you don't bring a bouquet of flowers to pick up your girlfriend from get off work, what's the difference with a taxi driver? At that time, the driver snorted and stepped on the gas pedal to the airport. The two of them didn't communicate much along the way. The main reason is that Shi Yan answered several work calls as soon as he was on the road. He didn't wear headphones, and played directly from the car center console. Shuyi had no choice but to be a little mute quietly. After the call completely stopped, Shi Yan stopped talking. Shuyi secretly looked at him several times, but did not see any change in his expression. TSK, she made it so obvious just now, and she didn't know how to coax her with a little nice word, so she drove quietly along the way. I really think of myself as a taxi driver. After arriving at the airport parking lot, before the car stopped, Shuyi asked, thank you, how much is it? When Shi Yan reversed the car, he gave Shuyi a cold look. He really is the driver. Shi Yan, 1905. Shuyi, there are 0 and whole. You made your fortune by stealing money, didn't you? No. Shi Yan smiled, I rely on Dad. Shuyi. After the car came to a complete stop, Shuyi was still lying on the co-pilot depressed, with his head drooping listlessly. Shi Yan looked at her for a while, with a smile in his eyes, and pinched her face. Look at the back seat. Shuyi looked back as he said. On the back seat was a black gift box with the word Rose shining brightly on it. Shuyi, no wonder the driver will surprise you. She didn't even unfasten her seat belt, twisted her upper body, and stretched out her hands to grab the gift box. Inside is a bouquet of champagne red roses. The fragrance of flowers filled Shuyi's heart. She held the flowers, rubbed her chin against the leaves, raised her eyes to meet Shi Yan's gaze, stared at each other for a moment, then turned her eyes, looked down at the rose in her hand, and her cheeks were also flushed. The temperature in the car rose slowly as she rolled her eyes. Although she didn't say a word, her demeanor at this time was more provocative than 100 words of love. With a click, Shi Yan unfastened his seat belt, leaned over and slowly leaned towards Shuyi. When his breath was getting closer and closer to Shuyi, suddenly, a cell phone rang suddenly, breaking the ambiguous atmosphere at the moment. The second Shuyi slid to the answer button, Bai Ruoshan's voice immediately rang. I actually met Song Lilan. My god, she didn't go to the VIP. Oh my god, it's the first time I see a live star, she's so beautiful. Get up close and personal. Can you come or not? Hurry up, arrive at the floor. Lots of people are asking her for a group photo here, but she didn't refuse. Shuyi took a breath of cold air, you wait. I'll come right away. At the same time as the car door was slammed open, the bouquet of roses worth 1,905 yuan was stuffed back into Song Leland's brother's arms with a swoosh.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to our channel for more captivating illustrated romance audiobooks. Don't miss out on our latest releases and be part of our growing community. Hit that subscribe button and embark on an enchanting journey with us.